Mao encouraged the Red Guards to attack Western influences and to destroy the four olds: old ideas, old culture, old customs, old habits. Without this destruction, he said, socialism cannot be achieved. The Red Guards tore down street signs and put up new revolutionary names. They ransacked museums, libraries, and temples. They searched and looted people's homes.
At first, they took my books, together with a bookcase. The second time, they searched for money. There were things that would get me in trouble. Later, they took the sewing machine and sofa, even the desk. There was no reason for it. My children were scared to death, shaking with fear.
Groups of Red Guards roamed the countryside, urging peasants to attack local officials. They came to Wugong in November 1966. Some villagers seized the chance to take revenge against officials who for years had given the best grain to the state.
They criticized old Shu. They said, "You old woman, you sifted and selected until there wasn't a single husk in the grain. You delivered such good grain to the state. You didn't want to leave any for us to eat, did you?" Several people went up to the platform and put a tall paper hat, it was at least this tall, on old Shu's head. They held her by the scruff of the neck and paraded her through the streets.
The violence soon turned against traditional targets of class struggle, like the former landlord's son, Li Maoshou.
I was tied up, hung up, and beaten up. One afternoon, I passed out 4 times. I stopped breathing. Later, they didn't even have to hit me. My breathing would stop when they hung me up. That's how bad it got. In China, fathers and sons traditionally have close ties. But now you had to end your relationship. It was really sad, but you just had to do it. After my son was struggled against for the first time, I claimed that our relationship had been broken off. Awful things would have happened to him if I hadn't done that.
Throughout China, party officials, intellectuals, people with foreign connections, former businessmen, millions were paraded and beaten in public. It is estimated that at least 400,000 people were killed.
We called him Secretary Zhang. He was the secretary at the state farm where my mother had worked. We all knew him when we were children. Once he dragged me by the ear for hundreds of yards. The side of my head got all swollen. He treated his subordinates very badly. When the Cultural Revolution came, the Red Guards and workers dragged him out to struggle with. He was not treated nicely because he'd been so mean to people. He was forced to kneel on the ground, on sand, broken stones, and glass, for more than 2 hours. He knelt with a heavy board hanging from his neck. It had his name written on it, with red crosses through it. That's how someone who was going to be shot was treated. The board was hanging on a very thin wire. So after 2 hours, blood oozed out on the wire and dripped down. He was over 50, or close to 60, and he was struggled against many, many times because people really hated him. Soon he died.
The people we beat up were all hooligans and loose women whose names were given to us by the workers. I put them on a truck and told them to kneel down. I whipped them with a leather belt. There were men and women. Most were women. We beat them hard. I had a kind of animal instinct. I used to enjoy beating people.
I didn't know most of the people who were struggled against. When we heard different views, we wondered, if you sympathized with the party official, did it mean you were too simplistic? Did it mean you lacked political consciousness and couldn't see his evil capitalist roader nature? Whenever a question came up, our first reaction was not to believe the official might be innocent, but that we were too naive and too inexperienced.
I didn't think about it much. Chairman Mao called on us to be involved with affairs of state, to be active in making revolution. We felt this was revolution. Chairman Mao had said, a revolution is an insurrection, an act of violence by which one class overthrows another. It's not a dinner party. We had to be rough and harsh and wild.
In my class, there was a student whose grandfather had owned a big fabric store, so he was a capitalist. I heard that everyone was to go to their house to criticize him. I got there late, and by the time I arrived, the capitalist had been beaten to death. I remember that his head was all swollen and dark and bruised. I didn't look for long, and then we all left. But later I learned that this capitalist was killed after my classmates got there. Other students and probably Red Guards from the neighborhood also got involved. All those people beat him to death, including his own granddaughter, my classmate. I didn't think much about it then because this kind of thing happened a lot. But years later, I thought about it many times and I wanted to find an answer. The question was very difficult. It was, if I had not arrived late, what would I have done? Would I have beaten him? He was a